Thank you so much for joining me today on the Positive Leadership Podcast and all of the listeners. It's a pleasure, it's a delight, and I'd like to go back to the beginning of your journey. You were born in Connecticut in the late 70s, and you spent your early childhood moving from place to place between Ghana to the US and Kenya before finally settling in Colorado Springs when you were, I think, 12. So how did that experience of being the perpetual new kid in the block or new kid in school shaped you as a person to start with?
It's funny. It's not until later on in my life when a great poet, some would just call him a hip-hop artist, but I call him a poet, Jay-Z, has a line in a song that says, "Allow me to reintroduce myself." That is the essence of my childhood. You know, I think that song came probably 20 years later after my experiences, but that's what it was like. You know, every time I entered a new playground, literally and figuratively, I had to reintroduce myself. I had to get people to say my name correctly. I had to find allies and friends immediately. I had to know who the bullies were and stay clear of them or make them my friends. I had to pick up cultural cues that would not make me a social pariah. Perhaps sometimes very different from the place I was just in. You know, because that happens all the time, right? Innocently, you say something or do something, and everybody says, "Oh, she's so uncool," and then you're stuck. You know, you're stuck at the table by yourself eating lunch alone. You know, and so my childhood and in moving around and having to reintroduce myself, I think just set me up really well. You know, set me up for an understanding of how to both acclimate to new environments without a ton of fear. I can't say that I'm not, I don't have fear, but help me to get comfortable in my fear of new experiences, new people, and also gain the confidence that you can find friends anywhere. You know, all you have to do is be open to it. All you have to do is ask the right questions. All you have to do is make sure that you're interested in them as much as you want them to be interested in you. So that was really I think, if anything, about the moving around and going into different environments, that is what I probably learned most from the time. Obviously, I couldn't articulate it like I can articulate it now. But that is probably the biggest lesson.
Oh, wonderful. In a way, it's about really getting outside of your zone of comfort many times since your very early days, and daring to connect, daring to act, daring to engage, daring to meet across Africa and the US. That's quite fascinating, because given the diversity, I'm sure the people, kids, families you met with, that must certainly have started to shape your personality and the way you've been starting to show up personally.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what, as you're mentioning that, I also think that maybe something I haven't actually recognized until just this very moment is that it gave me the chance to try out new things and fail sometimes at my reintroduction. You know, and then know that, okay, next time I'm not going to do that thing. You know?
I'm going to learn from that.
Which is very, very important, and has happened in my career too, right? Where it's like, okay, that didn't work out here. Let me not do that again at the next place. You know.
So continuing to build on that childhood, Buzz, I'd like to ask obviously about your parents. I mean, all the parents, like remember my late dad, wanted me to be a doctor. I understand your parents as well, or an engineer, but you decided differently. I understand you had some other ideas in mind. You love culture, music. I even found out that you started as a teacher on music, specialized on the lyrics of Tupac Shakur, which I must say I discovered through your own teaching. And you did that, I think, at UC Berkeley. So can you share with us, in a way, that moment where you decide to kind of take your own path, starting at the core of culture, music, personal expression of the people?
Yeah. Well, it's actually a really nice segue, because in my childhood, I had to constantly learn about culture, right? And again, I can articulate it so much better now than I could at 9.
Yes.
Right? But I was constantly pulling on pop culture to connect with people. And probably the most aggressive of that kind of environment was actually when I was 12 and moved to Colorado Springs, Colorado, directly from Ghana, right?
Yeah.
And it was that era of having to learn American football because at the time in Colorado Springs or in Colorado, the Denver Broncos were the kings of football. Yeah. And John Elway was the chieftain. You know, he was the high priest of football. And right in the backyard, you know? And so, and I didn't know about American football. I knew football.
Yeah. Exactly,
which is the other football.
Like me,
that's what I knew.
The real football, yes.
The real football, that's what I knew. And I was like, what is this thing? You know, why are they throwing the ball to each other, you know? And, you know, and like you said, music or film or TV shows, politics even, right? Those were all embedded in my sort of natural survival and then became a real interest. It became like a habit. And so by the time I was in college, and yes, following my parents' hopes and dreams of becoming a doctor, I was carrying the full course load of pre-med, but I was also taking lots of classes in the arts, English, a lot of history, literature, you know, and discovering so much richness in storytelling, especially of the African American experience that I really hadn't been privy to before that. And yes, of course, very much in love with Tupac Shakur, who died way too early, you know? But I found him to be a poet. Like I said, you know, Jay-Z's a poet. Tupac is a poet. There's so many poets in music, you know, the lyrics are incredible. And so I'd heard about the class at UC Berkeley. I was going to Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut, where incidentally I was also born. And I petitioned my dean to make a class like that at Wesleyan. And they refused. They said, we don't have the time for that. We don't even know what you're talking about. You know, this is not what we teach here. We are a very nice, you know, like little
serious.
Ivy school. Yes, we're serious about academics now. You can explore if you want to, because they encouraged discovery, but they were not about to add it to their own curriculum. So I took it upon myself to write the curriculum. Then went back to the dean and petitioned again and said, well, now I have the curriculum.
Let's do it.
All I need is support. So let me teach it. And to my complete awe and shock, they allowed me to teach the class. So yeah, I taught it for 3 semesters.
Wonderful.
On top of my full course load and everything else. And it was brilliant. It was wonderful. I think, you know, again, just thinking about what that experience probably taught me was that, you know, people can often say no to you. They can often deny you the thing you want to do because of their own limited experiences. But even if you haven't done it before, the passion, the power that you have within yourself to create should be explored. And therefore, you should always say yes to yourself.
Absolutely. Dare to ask, dare to do it all the time.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So after that, which was a wonderful moment, and maybe later on I come back to teaching. Who knows? Maybe this is a vocation for the future, but I don't want to turn the page yet. But just teasing you. So you moved to New York, Boz, obviously, and you after graduated from college, and you got a wonderful start marketing in a very special ad agency led by Spike Lee himself. And I know that you've been reflecting on that in terms of some of the very first big leadership lessons you had working with Spike Lee and his team, and the way he was making decisions, the way he was making big bets. So how did how did you kind of reflect on that after that wonderful experience?
Well, you know, again, sometimes I look back at my career and experiences, and I literally cannot believe how destiny sort of played out along the way. You know, that everything that was set up in my life that felt accidental was actually part of some master plan that I had no part in creating, by the way. That's the humility I walk around with. That, yes, of course I have power. Of course I have an option to do or not to do, but that there is something so much greater than myself, which is leading me to places that I could have never dreamed. And walking into Spike Lee's office when I had no experiences, no job, no real opportunities anywhere in New York City by myself, you know, at 23 years old, I didn't anticipate that the lessons I would learn there would serve me for the rest of my life.
Yes.
You know? Or that he would become a friend and a mentor for the rest of my life. You know? But Spike is an extraordinary person, not just as an artist, but as a philosopher, as a social activist, as a black person. You know, he really helped me to understand this complete drive for doing exactly what you want to do, regardless of your critics. He was shocking, you know. It was shocking to be in that kind of intimate space with him and watch him react to criticism. You know, what a lesson, what an incredible opportunity, you know, to really be present when you see someone who has poured their heart and soul into their work, and then somebody else tears it down. And how do they react to that? It tells a lot about a human and about a person.
Big time.
You know, and I won't say that he's superhuman. It wasn't like he just brushed it off and said, "Oh, who cares? You know, screw them." He didn't. It wasn't like that. He would be very considerate of the feedback. You know, take it in, but at a point where he understood that his art was right. That was the lesson that I learned from him. That he knew that regardless of what anybody said about it, they said it was the wrong thing, was the wrong choices, creatively he missed. He knew that his art was right. And he stuck by that. And that is an incredible lesson that I learned, because I certainly have had my fair share of critics now, JP. I've had critics, okay?
Yes.
but I know I'm right. I know I'm right. Like everything that I do, every way that I move, and that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that I'm arrogant not to learn from things that go wrong, but that my expression of self is right all the time.
I got you. Wonderful lesson to share with our listeners, Boz. I think you also quoted as saying that one of the most important qualities a leader should develop is empathy and the ability to listen really deeply. So how did you learn from other leaders, maybe Spike himself and maybe some others, who has been inspiring you or maybe coaching you along the way, to develop that critical capability? I think that every leader, whatever level the person is, it doesn't matter to me, can actually embrace, be an incredible listener of talking much less and listening deeply, not superficially, to what the other person has to tell with her guts, with her mind, her heart, not just with the words. How did you learn that?
You know, I think I learned as much from leaders and people I worked for who did it right as much as I learned it from people who did it wrong.
Yeah, of course.
You know? Because I think that is actually the part of leadership that I love most, is that you're not born a leader. You know, you have some natural qualities, I'm sure, that people are born with. I think that I'm naturally born with. But I think it's nurture in the experiences of being led that actually help you to shape who you are as a leader. You know, that's why I don't think it's a singular journey.
No.
You know, as the inputs come from so many different places, that there are the positive and the negatives that then form who you are. And so sometimes I look at really bad leaders and I'm just like, ooh, you must have had some really terrible people in your life.
I don't want to look like him.
Taught you some bad, I'm like, some people really steered you wrong, you know? And I think it's like almost like a group project. You know, great leaders are not just great leaders because they're great leaders because they were led very well. They were led very, very well. And so when I think about, you know, the experiences of empathy or of listening, hearing, you know, both of those and all of those experiences are born out of my own personal experience, you know, that happened to me in my life, where I didn't feel heard or I didn't feel seen. And therefore I want to make sure other people are heard and other people are seen.
Being seen.
As much it was from, you know, people who really did hear me and see me. I think the thing that always scares us as leaders is that we think we have to be textbook. You know, as if like the office or our teams can only see what is the professional or the corporate life. But how is that possible? We are human beings with one experience. You know, it's
it is not
personal. It comes into the professional. And so the empathy of understanding why someone behaves the way they do, or why they wouldn't show up in a meeting, or why they would be quiet, why they would be afraid to say the thing that's on their mind, why they would be, so dismissive of other people. That is not just about the workspace. That's also about the personal space. What else is going on in their lives that is causing them to behave this way?
Yeah.
And so for me, the listening is as much about what a person says as much it is thinking about what it is that might be also causing them to be the way that they are, and then picking up those clues, because people don't often tell you that.
No.
You have to infer. And so, yes, I do think it's very important as a leader to know your team so well that you can tell when someone walks in and their energy is off. Something is different.
Yes.
And either excusing them, without saying anything, right? Allowing them to be. Or helping to find a way to encourage them. And sometimes it's a little bit, it's a little bit of the hit and miss, it's maybe it's like if somebody, it's like any relationship, it's like you have somebody on your team, they show up a little off that day, they're not on their game, they seem to be missing, and or I try to, maybe it's about talking and figuring out what else is going on, so that I can help them get that out, and once they get it out, then they can focus on the thing they're supposed to be doing. Or sometimes it's just like, leave them the hell alone. Don't say anything. Pretend like it doesn't exist and just let them be. Because some people just need to work it out themselves. And as long as you are that in tune and care that much, you'll be a much more effective leader, and a much more positive one in that case, because people will see your care of them.
Yes. No, it's really well said, Boz. In my own experience as a leader as well, I learned the lesson in a good and tough way sometimes, but what it takes in terms of creating a climate of safety, of trust with the people one by one in your team, to enable them, to get them to open up. And it starts, I think, by being yourself, of course, truly vulnerable, not artificially, truly authentic, which I know that you are doing a lot, and you've been working a lot on that yourself as an example, so that others, whatever the level is, again, doesn't matter, can truly feel safe by speaking up, by sharing more than just words, but emotions, personal, big challenges they have in their lives, because we all have just one life, as you said rightly. So I'm with you, and it's very much aligned with the philosophy I have with positive leadership. So let's continue maybe a little bit, Boz. I mean, you left Spike's agency at one point to manage big brands like PepsiCo, beverage portfolio, and you rose as well to head of music entertainment marketing there. In 2013, you negotiated a very, very special deal between Pepsi and the NFL to run the infamous Super Bowl halftime show with Beyonce. And I know it was a huge cultural moment, not just for you. I think for many, many, many people, not just within the brands, but outside. So was it for you like a massive personal, professional win at the time in terms of realizing, wow, I can actually do that through that strong confidence and expression of the way I think about culture and the way that culture should be brought to the people in such a creative way for the Super Bowl?
Yes. Well, there are so many places to go with that question. It's like you've opened up like Pandora's box, with that one, in the way that you asked the question, because I've talked about that experience so much, but you've sparked something else that I am considering right now in this moment, which is that, I think sometimes in business, you think that your singular experience doesn't matter because you're trying to speak to the masses. In American sport, there's no bigger stage than the Super Bowl halftime show. There just isn't. It's the biggest one. It has the most eyeballs. And like you said, it crosses the borders to some degree. And other people who may not have an interest in the sport itself care about the performance that's happening at the halftime show. And in that moment in 2013, there had been, in my opinion, not a lot of artists on the stage that were connecting to the audience in the time.
I see. Yeah.
In the time. There were greats, legends, who had done amazing things, but years passed, sometimes decades passed, and they were incredible performers, but safe bets, because they would reach the widest audience. And at the time that we were negotiating the deal with the Super Bowl and with the NFL, there were options that could have been safe, that could have been, legendary acts who would have been fine, And by the way, as a business person, who doesn't want to recommend the thing that is going to win, the sure win?
Of course. It's a safe win.
It's a safe
proposition.
Yes. Like sometimes, it's like we as leaders, we think, what, if I can win at 80%, let me just do the 80%, because if I try to win at 100 and it goes to 20,
that's a big risk.
Look, that's a big risk. And so you don't want to take it. And I understand why most people do that. And guess what? There are a lot of people who are in the Hall of Fame who hit 80% consistently.
Yeah.
I'm not mad at them. Okay?
Yeah.
My life is not set up that way. I prefer to swing for the fences. I prefer to try to get to the 100. And if I get to 20, you know what? I will crawl into a cave and hide out for a little while until I lick my wounds and make sure that I'm okay, and then come back out.
You know
what
I mean?
Yeah, I'll come with sunglasses and maybe like a wig on and make sure nobody can see me, but I'm going to come back outside,
I love it.
But that moment with Beyonce, it was such a fight. It was a real fight to get her on the stage, because she's a black woman. There hadn't been a black woman on the stage since Janet Jackson and her wardrobe malfunction with Justin Timberlake. I always like to mention his name, too, because people want to always say Janet. And I'm like, no, Justin's the one that pulled it. But in any case, there hadn't been a black woman on that stage, and there was all kinds of what I felt were biases that were outside of the regular biases that we all know that go against people of color and women, And those biases extended to wardrobe and the performance, and could she connect with the large audience that way, and all kinds of things. That it was just, of course, now sitting here, almost a decade later, everyone would say, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Why wouldn't you want Beyonce?" You know what I mean? But at the time, it was a real conversation. And the reason why I bring it back to our singular experiences being important is that I knew it. I felt it. I loved Beyonce, loved and love still. And I felt personally responsible. Yes, as a black woman, but also personally responsible to make sure that in my seat, I uplifted people, performances, culture that is important to me. And that, I think, sometimes is missing in our leadership. We think that it's better, like, again, to hit the 80 which is the masses and safe, rather than to go for the 100, which could fail. And look, we were in danger. It could have failed. It could have failed miserably. It could have been awful. But instead, I don't even think we hit 100. We hit like 150. That joint was in the stratosphere, gone, And the thing is that the other lesson in that is that our experiences, even if unique and singular, can still connect. People can still empathize. People can still enjoy. People can still feel excitement, even if they're not close to the experience that you're talking about. And that was the proof in Beyonce's performance at Super Bowl.
No, I think what a wonderful reflection, I think, Boz. I mean, I heard you talk about that story many times, but I think the angle you gave in your response, I love it. I love the 80, and I love the 150 as well. Better. No, exactly. I love the fact, I mean, the way you talk about it, it's about the way you've been, not just speaking up, you've been really elevating, actually, something bigger than yourself. Through, of course, someone who has become afterwards an icon globally of something that was critical culturally for, I think, for the masses, for everyone, for all the people. And that took some courage, for sure, a lot of courage to push that idea through. So congrats on that. I recently had a podcast which will be on the air soon with someone called Bill George. Bill George used to be the CEO of Medtronic, healthcare company. And he also published a book called Discover Your True North. And he's got this concept that he calls a crucible. And a crucible the way he talks about it is one of the very few defining moments in your life. One of those defining moments where something deep is happening into yourself that is really changing in a way, I'm not saying your DNA, but the substance of who you're going to be in the future. And I wanted to say, to me, it sounds like that particular moment could be maybe, but of course you'll be the own judge to decide that maybe in your book, could be one of your crucibles of defining who Boz is going to be all about.
No, that is so interesting. I love that concept, that crucible concept. I think I've had a lot of crucibles. Actually.
A lot. So let's explore a few more, maybe.
I think there've been quite a few. And if I consider the time, you know, the 2013 as a crucible year. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
You know, with many things that happened, and two big ones, one at the start and one at the end. So at the start was Beyonce and the Super Bowl. At the end, in December, on December 11, 2013, is when my husband passed away from cancer.
Yes.
And that crucible moment absolutely changed my life. It changed everything about the way that I am, the way that I think, the way that I live. It changed everything. You know, I think there's a quote somewhere, I'm not quite sure who said it, but it's about, you know, how our experiences shape us, not because of the things that happen to us, but because of the way that we react to the things.
Absolutely.
You know, and it's a choice. It is a choice. And at the time, my daughter was 4. I just had a very powerful year, as we've just talked about. I was at some highs in my life, in career-wise anyway. But at the same time, my husband was battling cancer, and we weren't sure what was going to happen. And in the end, when he was told that his cancer was going to be terminal and that he didn't have much longer, the list of things that we created to do together, I guess you could call it a bucket list of sorts, but they weren't the things that I think some people think, you know, it's like, oh, go jump out of a plane and, you know, it's like travel to Malaysia and backpack. It wasn't that. Well, first of all, he wasn't healthy enough to do that. But also, it wasn't that. They were smaller but much more significant. You know, they were the conversations that we had avoided. You know, it was the small experience that you knew would be the last one. Yes. That savoring of life. Yes. Really understanding that moments really do matter. We say it all the time, right? That it's like we should live life like as if it's your last. We say that kind of stuff all the time. And maybe people think that's morbid. I actually think it's very inspiring.
It is.
You know, his death inspired me. It inspired me. Now, I wish he hadn't have died. With every cell in my being, it still brings me to tears even as I sit here. Yeah. But his death won't go he wouldn't have died for nothing. You know, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. That he died, and I am going to take inspiration from it. You know, I'm going to live a bigger life because of it. I'm going to live a more expressive life because of it. I'm going to live a more urgent life.
Urgent life, yes.
Urgent life. You know, it is what I now am so grateful and thankful for. You know, I do believe in an afterlife, and I can't wait until one day when I see him again. I'm just like, well, thank you so much for the gift. Thank you so much for the gift of allowing me to live such a great life. Yeah. Because you died. You know, I honestly, JP, as I sit here, I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll never know if I would have been as expansive in my career and in my life had I not have had this experience. This experience,
yes. Okay. Yeah. I can feel it. I mean, I can feel it in your voice. I can feel it as well clearly, you know, in the way you talk about it. And I think it's I mean, I must say myself, I had to go through one of those crucibles, losing my son a few years ago, and and in a way, the way you share your story with your husband resonate deeply with me, obviously, Boz, because I've definitely considered life very differently the day after, and that sense of urgency, that sense of contribution as well, to do more as well, not just for me, but for others, and maybe in a modest way for the world, whatever it means for me and others, is something I can relate to. So I'd like you maybe to elaborate a little bit more on that urgency in the way you've been doing it since then. I know you've been living incredibly intensely with your husband for 6 months before he passed away. And as you said, interesting enough, which I love as well, it's not about those big spectacular things that that you see in the movie with Jack Nicholson. Actually, that's Beckett. I recall the movie, exactly. But it's about those very small things, those very small, very deep, personal, intimate things with the people you love the most, I think. And so, could you share with us in a way that has been shaping you beyond the 6 months, because for the last decade and more to come, the depths of that urgency, the vibrancy of that urgency, what it means when you wake up in the morning, or when you go to bed and you reflect on your day or not, saying, well, did I actually respected my urgency contract with myself, if I may use that expression?
Yes. The word that you use that I love so much is vibrancy. What a great word, to describe what urgency actually means. That there is so much excitement that we're privy to, that we can choose. I have a very hard time now. I'll start from now and then go a little backwards, right? I have a very hard time now with situations, people, relationships, experiences that are not satisfying to me. And I think it's so funny, because I think maybe some people would consider it a selfish way to live, to think about yourself. I don't think so, and it's not at the cost of other people. That's not what I'm saying, but it's a self-awareness is really what I mean, in that way, where you are focused on what is making you happy. And happiness is not a throwaway word, I don't mean the sugar high type of happiness that dissipates after a few hours and you're like, oh, what's next, but the things that really make you happy, make you open your eyes in the morning and say, oh, well, thank God for another day. And I'm not saying that every experience is every single day you wake up and bound out of bed. That's not it. There are still valleys. But my point is that my urgency and the vibrancy with which I'm living my life forces me to constantly evaluate whether or not I am enjoying the thing that I'm in. And if I'm not, I have very little patience to remain.
I'm with you. And because I think you have this sense of scarcity of being joyful and living some very unique moments with real people who matter, and people with whom you can actually, you can not just have a good relationship with, but you can actually achieve more together. At least that's the way I can think about it, and then and the way it connects with me. And building on that, maybe, Boz, in a way, I was thinking about living your life urgently, which I know is something you are working on actively on a book. So you can talk about that. To me, it kind of also means maybe not waiting anymore to realize your full potential for each one of us. So helping you becoming what I would call the best version of yourself. And usually, when you can unlock your greatness, is when you work on the harder things as well.
Yes.
And I was having a discussion actually with one of my guests in the podcast, someone you may know or not. His name is Michael Bungesteiner. He's a bestseller author of the best-selling book ever on coaching. It's called The Coaching Habits. Wonderful. He's been my coach myself. I've been using him across Microsoft to transform thousands of people. And I was discussing with Michael actually one of his last book, which is really all about, it's called How to Begin. Mm-hmm. How can you actually really shape what he's calling your worthy goals? So basically the projects that are really thrilling, deeply important, and daunting. And but of course, defining them is one thing, but achieving them is much harder. And so just to finish on that, Michael has been writing this interesting book on the way you do that, on the worthy goals, and the way you start getting committed to achieving those worthy goals. It's a practical guide. So my question to you is more about, you are really, I think, on one of those worthy goals, because I think it's super hard to write a book, by the way. So first of all, I'll give you that one saying, wow, that's a huge one. And I look forward really to read your book, both when it's published. But what are, if you may share, what are the other big worthy goals that you are working on, maybe, that you're thinking about? And they might not be out yet, but the big things that you have on your mind.
Gosh, well, there's so much that goes into writing a book, as you know. And as you've said, it's not an easy thing. It's not the type of thing that, you go into, I think, even knowing what it's going to do or how you're going to react. The fact that there is so much that sometimes can be unearthed out of the experience of writing that if you knew, you probably wouldn't do it. Is that okay to say? If you knew what it would take, you probably would. Actually, you know what? Let me not make it about other people. Let me make it about myself. If I knew what it would take, I don't know that I would have done it. It's so difficult.
Difficult, yeah.
And I don't. Much like grief, I don't like to compare. Because I'm like, look, grief is grief. Somebody's hardship is, you can't compare it to somebody else's. You know, it's like writing a memoir and writing a self-help book and writing a, book of poetry are all very different experiences. I'm not going to say one is harder than another, but the only thing I've written is a memoir, and I know that joint is hard. Okay, it is very difficult.
It is,
and the idea of really going deep into your experience and sharing it, being vulnerable with it, is much scarier than I thought. It's interesting. I was having this conversation with one of my mentors, Ariana Huffington, a few weeks ago. I had just, or actually a few months ago, I had just turned in the final copy edited, version of the book, and I called her in terror. Because I was like, oh my God, what have I done? Why did I do it? Why did you tell me not to do it? Blaming everyone else. And she said, she's like, just consider that the truth is a privilege.
Yes.
It's a real privilege. She's like, not everybody is entitled to your truth. She's like, I don't know why people think that everybody is entitled to truth. Like, it's a privilege. And she's like, and you can decide whether or not you think these strangers, these people who don't know you, who will pick up your words and interpret it for themselves, are they worthy of your truth?
Yeah. Oof.
That knocked me on my butt. I sat down and I said, "Oh my God, I had never considered that. That truth is a privilege." And for me, I think part of my now confidence in being able, and maybe confidence is too strong of a word because I still have my days where I'm unsure.
Of course, we all do.
But maybe more my comfortability. Let's put it that way. My comfortability with being able to share this very vulnerable expression is that I do think my truth is valuable, and I believe that expressing it is a gift to myself, and not so much about other people and what they need from me.
Yes.
But that the privilege of sharing my truth is one that I value very much and one that I am proud of. And so regardless of how people will react to it or how they'll interpret it is actually not my burden. I hope that people see it in a way that will help them to live their own urgent lives. I really hope that that's what happens.
Yes.
That people will read it and say, but I can too.
I can do the same.
I can do it. That regardless of the things that have happened to me, that I can choose to live a life that is worthy of living. It's worthy of the breath. It is worthy of the excitement. It is worthy of me.
Yes.
That you won't just skate through the experiences. You won't just count down the days and say, okay, well, fine. Ooh, thank God we're at the end of another year. Now what's this next year got to have? It's like, no. You got to feel like, I want to do the next big thing. I want to do the thing that's going to make me sit down and tell my grandchildren one day. I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to 80-year-old Boz. I really am. I'm excited for her. I'm excited for the story she's going to tell. I'm excited for the 0 F's she's going to give. I'm excited about how she'll tell her grandchildren stories that are probably very inappropriate. I'm excited.
You're excited about that. That's fantastic. We are coming almost to an end, Boz. I want to obviously make sure we stay on the time. But a couple of last questions, if I may. I know you've been speaking, in the past about how very different people throughout your career have wanted to change you. They wanted to change you, literally. They wanted you to tone down your look, your voice, basically to take up less space, right? To be absent.
Yes.
And I think it's a big question, obviously, these days, even more so. I mean, it's been always a huge question, I think, which is the question of conformity and the question of real difference and diversity in a richest possible way, which is, how would you? So let me define the question. Given the experience you've gone through in a very early age, we talk about your very early starts in Colorado, Ghana, Kenya, many different places where you showed up, and people probably didn't expect you to show up the way you showed up, and so in a way you become, I think you are one of those role models for people. A number of very different people, by the way, of course African Americans, but many others as well, on not necessarily accepting conformity, but bringing the very best of who you are. So what would be your coaching advice for all the listeners on the podcast who are coming from all kind of paths in life, right? Because all of people kind of so different stories, gender, ethnics, huge drama in their lives, where they have a hard time to conform and they are suffering every day. What is your coaching moment with all those people listening to you, not just on what you did, but the best way to do that and to evolve and not conform, not accept to conform anymore?
Wow.
That's a big one.
It's enormous. It's a big one. Maybe that'll be my next book. Wait, no, I don't want to write another book, right? Because I just said how difficult it was. Let me not commit that now. Exactly.
Well, it must be maybe a chapter of your book. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay, maybe it makes it into a chapter. No, it's such a big question because I think it is not an easy one.
No.
Conformity is so easy. And it is what our natural human instinct is. And so we're actually fighting our nature when we don't conform. Like we're tribal. We're tribal.
Yes.
We've always been as human beings, right?
Yeah.
We come together in groups. Of course, back in the day, by
communities,
proximity, exactly. Now more so about interest, or ways that maybe it's work related, or it's sports, or it's music, or something else, right? That makes you stick to tribes, and so conforming to those identities is natural. What I want us to consider when we think about nonconformity is not so much living in the uncomfortable or going against our nature. You know, that's not the opposite thing, actually. I think you think conformity, you're like, oh, then you must not conform, which means I must live in the uncomfortable. No, you don't need to do that. I actually want you to get even deeper in your comfort. Get deeper. You think you're comfortable now. I promise you, you are not. The deeper you go, it's like burrowing into the center of the earth. Getting even more into your comfort zone as your individual self is actually what makes you unconform.
Yes.
You know, you get into a place where you truly value yourself. You are excited about yourself. You think that your history, your experiences, your ideas, your thoughts, your values are important contributions to the world, to your society, to your neighborhood, to your family, and then even to yourself. You know? And getting even more comfortable is actually what breaks you out of the conformity. Because there's no way that you know, can love all those things about yourself, value all those things about yourself, and then conform to something that doesn't fit. It's impossible. So what you see is not a challenge. Like when people look at me and they say, well, she doesn't conform, she's a disruptor, you know, she does things her way, she doesn't care about the thing. No. It's not that. It's not that. Actually, what you're looking at is someone who is entirely comfortable with herself. Very comfortable. There aren't parts of me, even the stuff that is not great, that I don't love. You know? Even that stuff I love. I'm like, oh, you know what? I can be a little bit of an asshole, but I like it anyway. You know?
No, I love the way, again, you express that, Boz. I mean, maybe to finish with my very last question. In a way, it reminds me, actually, on a podcast, again, guest I had, is one of, you know, the godfathers of positive psychology. His name is Kim Cameron, and he's been writing a few great books. And what he did with me during the podcast was interesting, was an exercise. It's called The Best Self-Portrait. And what he did... He sent an email without copying it. He just asked me names of people I knew really well, personally, family, deep friends, professional, social life, 7. And he asked them to write down 10, 12 lines on the best stories of JP in his life. They've seen the best of me. And then he's been reading that to me anonymously. I didn't know who was said, although, of course, the stories would tell me, oh, yeah, I think I know who's that.
Right.
But this work, which is at the core of that positive leadership and positivity, gives you so much positive energy, gives you so much more confidence in your strengths, in your talents, in your passion, where you do the best and where you can bring the best to others and to the world. And so I'd like to finish that, unfortunately, too short of a time together on the podcast, with a question about your own way to generate positivity, not just within yourself, because I think you start with yourself first, every morning, every day, and sometimes we have very bad days, horrible days. And yet, how do you come up, not just with a nice smile and beautiful colors, but with positivity that is contagious with others, that drive others to do more in their jobs, in their lives, in their initiatives. So that would be my last question as a positive leader, and I can even envision you as a teacher of positive leadership. What would be that way for you to generate, manage, and drive the positivity, Boz?
Well, I think it's pretty simple, you know, which is that it's like a baby. You know, if you've ever interacted with, let's say, a 6-month-old, you know, old enough to recognize what you're doing with your face, if you smile at a baby, more than likely they smile back at you.
They do.
If you make a mean face, they get a little scared and they get a little worried. Their face changes, you know? If you cry, they get confused. You know, they're looking at you like, what is wrong? They can't articulate those things, but the facial expression, the way that you express yourself, has great impact. We think that changes over time. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It continues.
Yes.
You know? And so when I walk into a room, and I think if there were people who were talking about stories about me, you know, or giving me that kind of self-portrait,
Yeah.
they would say that when I am very excited about something, or I'm happy about something, or I'm frustrated about something,
Yeah.
or I'm angry about something, everyone can feel it.
Uh-huh.
I don't play the poker face. I don't do that. I think it's a disservice.
Yeah.
It's a disservice to our teams. It's a disservice to our relationships to pretend as if everything is okay when the sky is
When
falling.
it's not okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, or to play it safe and quiet when you're super enthused.
Yeah.
By the way, even about your own ideas.
Yes.
Now, maybe your ideas are terrible, but having enthusiasm about it
Yes.
allows for other people to also show up with enthusiasm. You know, so it is like smiling and enjoying the experience you're having, which allows other people to give it back to you. And so I don't know that it's necessarily just about, you know, me exuding my excitement versus that I am trying to elicit a reaction from people, which is compatible with how I'm feeling. And if it is not compatible, then that changes. I am as much a receptor as I am an exhibitor.
Yeah.
You know? And so if I walk in and you're downtrodden and you feel depressed or you feel angry, I'm also going to take that. And so that's why I am very consciously empathetic about what is happening in the environment so it can help to change the environment and make us all better in that way.
Fantastic. And in a way, I'm going to capture what you said, and I'm going to do a shortcut, of course. And it's like, you know, it's like really being that baby again, right?
Yes.
Being that baby again that you're talking about, with literally reacting with her emotions, with her sense of what's going on with that, with my mom, with that other person in front of me, and having that deep visceral connection as a baby. Maybe I don't know. That's that's
but
because
it's something to explore, JP. Right? I mean, I don't know that we talk enough about that. You know, I think we should. Maybe you should do another podcast about that. You know, the behaviors that we keep from infancy.
Yes, exactly. So with that, Boz, I wanted first of course to deeply thank you. It's been really a delight to have this conversation with you.
Pleasure, yes.
Get to know you a little bit better, because I certainly don't pretend to know you well. Although you are showing, I think, a lot about yourself in every conversation. That's, I think, real. I can feel it, despite the video conferencing. Like you are in the same room, I'm sure I could feel even more. And so it's been really fantastic to have your voice, not just your voice, your emotions, your lessons being learned and shared with our listeners. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, Boz. And hopefully one day maybe our paths will cross in the US or somewhere in the world. If you come to Paris, you're welcome. More than happy to have you for a cup of coffee or lunch. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, JP. This has been truly a pleasure. And I'm very, very appreciative of the mission and also the conversation. So thank you.
And all the very best for your book, of course.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you.
It's a big deal.